us as doctors, as business owners, telling people when they're doing a good job, but then also creating an internal system. So it's not just you saying, hey, good job. It's everybody looking for that opportunity.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry look like to you? I'm Katie Polson, a dental hygienist and your host. Welcome to another episode of Growth in Dentistry. We are continuing our conversation on the staffing shortage, but before we get started, I wanted to invite you to join our Facebook Dental Intelligence community. Also, we want to hear from you. We would love if you would like, subscribe, rate, review, really all the things. Just punch them all. If you have a question or comment, go to our podcast page at dentalintel.com and record one. They will be featured on an upcoming episode. Now on to our show today. We are really excited to continue our discussion, the staffing dilemma. And with me to discuss that is, I want to introduce you guys to Steve Jensen, Vice President of Business Development. This is his first time with us on this podcast, and he will be with us for the upcoming podcast and our discussion with staffing. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
And he's going to introduce our fabulous guest today.
Well, I am thrilled to be here today, and even more thrilled to introduce our guest with us. It's Dr. Cameron Quail, and it's a name that you may have not heard of. If you go and just Google Cameron Quail, you'll find all sorts of wonderful things. Cam, before he became a pediatric dentist, actually played a stint in the NFL. So he was first drafted as Mr. Irrelevant. I got that right, Cam. Isn't that Mr. Irrelevant?
Nailed it.
But I'll tell you that Cam is far from irrelevant in terms of the way that he lives his life, in the way that he parents, in the way that he coaches and trains and works with his team, as well as many dental professionals in the industry. I've watched as an observer. My wife actually worked for Cam in his offices, and I've watched from the outside as Cam lives a very relevant life, in my opinion. And I have been impressed over the years at the value that he brings to everyone that he engages with. So when we were talking about who could we bring onto the podcast that could speak to bringing value to team members and value to the industry and helping teams feel engaged, Dr. Cameron Quail was the first person that came to my mind. He runs a pediatric practice, is an owner in several locations here in Utah. Mountain View Pediatric is the name of his group. And then also started a humanitarian foundation called Mason Gives, which is an absolutely wonderful foundation that you ought to check out as well if you're looking at getting involved in some dental humanitarian and leadership training. So with that being said, I want to introduce Cam Quail to the stage. So Cam, thank you for joining us.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here. It's an interesting topic, but I'm excited to share any insights that we can bring up that will help other dental professionals, because it is a unique time, one of the more unique times I've seen in my career. So every little bit helps us learn even more. So I'm excited to be here, help out one of my colleagues.
Definitely. I think a lot of people are going to tune into this podcast. The pain of staffing shortage a lot of people were struggling to find assistance before the pandemic. And now we're not even after. We're still in Utah. We're still very much in the pandemic.
In the thick.
Yes. But that being said, it's just gotten worse. So we're excited to hear from your viewpoint as a practicing dentist and owner. So what advice do you have for those struggling with? We wanted to talk about creating a valuable place to work, because we've noticed in our research with staffing that is one of the places that we can start with, just creating a valuable team and a valuable place to work. So what advice do you have for those that are struggling with that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is creating that value before the crisis hits. Because once you're scrambling with everybody. You're scrambling with Arby's, with Amazon, with Domino's. Everybody's trying to hire. But creating that value before it hits creates stability with your team, creates a family where they don't want to go anywhere else, even though they might be able to make more money at a different job, maybe not as ideal hours, but creating that value. But for those of you who haven't already created the value, you're in the thick of it. So what can you do right then to create a valuable place to work? I think one of the simplest and most important and easy, cost-free from a business owner standpoint, is gratitude. Everybody loves to hear that they're valued. Everyone loves to hear hey, you did a great job with that little kid today. He was super scared. You got him back in the chair. You comforted him. By the time I was ready to do the procedure, he didn't even know I existed. He was just watching the movie. So I think recognizing A, that your team is doing amazing things, but then B, verbalizing that and saying, hey, you did a great job. And that's just your eyes. We've created a little system in our office called a Mason. Our mascot for our office is a big moose, and his nickname is Mason the Moose. So one of the things we've done is we've created an award system within the office called the Mason. And it's actually pretty fun. Every morning during our morning huddle, we go through our different things that we have to do to make sure the day will run smoothly. And then the person leading the huddle will say, hey, are there any Masons? And it's a venue and a format for the different team to say, hey, yeah, I saw Hannah working with this kid that was really scared. Or somebody else can say, hey, I looked at our Google review page last night, and Gaddy was mentioned for being so awesome with this kid. So I think those are two simple things is us as doctors, as business owners, telling people when they're doing a good job, but then also creating an internal system. So it's not just you saying, hey, good job. It's everybody looking for that opportunity. And then when somebody does get a Mason, we've got a bunch of gift cards right there in the break room. You say, hey, pull them out like a poker deal and say, which one do you want? There's Starbucks, there's Arby's, there's Chick-fil-A. So it's just $10, $15. And yeah, we spend several hundred, if not a few $1,000s a year on that. But the staff knows we're looking for the good. They know that we're not just there to talk about when they're deficient. And I think that creates a great environment for when there is a team member doing something that is not up to our standards or our values. We've already made enough positive deposits in the relationship between them that we can go make a little bit of a withdrawal and say, hey, you're great with Johnny yesterday, but you showed up 25 minutes late today.
Yeah.
So I think that gratitude goes a long, long way.
Yeah. Let me talk a little, let's continue on that idea, because I feel like when you have a Mason, when someone is looking for someone to give a Mason to or an award to, right? It's really hard. There's so much, especially in dentistry, there's there can be a lot of backbiting and staffing problems. And it's really hard to not like your employees when you're trying to look for the good in them,
right?
Or your staff members, and so your team. So I love that idea. How long have you been doing that? Make the Mason Awards? Oh
wow. The Mason Awards, I bet we've been doing it 5 or 6 years. We've given out probably hundreds of gift cards, but it's fun. Like all you have to say is, oh, I got a Mason. And people are like, oh yeah, what did you do?
Yes.
It's part of our culture now. And it's fun because we actually tape the little cards up to the wall above our break room computer. And over the years, the little adhesive has pulled off pieces of paint. And it's kind of fun. It's a warboard of, oh, that's where somebody pulled off and got something. And that's where something's truthfully, we probably ought to paint it, but it's a fun little, it's fun that we've done it enough that it's peeling the paint off the walls.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen a difference in the way that you view your employees and the way that they view each other, especially after, before the 5 years and after. So that's awesome.
Mind if I say something?
Yeah, yes.
Something that I think is brilliant about the way that you even structured that, Cam. This morning, I'll share an example. This morning, I was hanging out with my kids. I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I had this vivid moment when I realized that my 5-year-old is literally just trying to copy me, right? Like he looks up to me, he does what I do, he says what I say. And I noticed that he was talking the way that I talk to my wife, which thankfully in this moment was a good thing. And he was being very sweet to her. And I realized, wow, he's literally just doing what I'm doing. And I think for most parents, they could recognize the same thing in their children, at least when they're young. As they get older, maybe they get a little bit more self-control and want to stick it to the man maybe. But I think the same thing, without us realizing, can play through in our leadership strategy within a practice or in a business. So one thing that I think is brilliant, Cam, that you identified was first as a leader, starting with your own personal gratitude. And as you do that and live that way, I guarantee that your team will begin to notice that, and they'll naturally want to be more grateful in their lives as well. But what you've done is also given them a structure to be grateful and emulate that same behavior. So that's something that Cam values, and I do as well. I think that's huge for a team. And by giving them the structure of Mason Gives, it creates a space where it shows that not only are you going to be grateful, but you want the team members to be grateful for all of the great things that are happening in practice. I think that's really smart the way that you structured that.
For sure.
And there's so much to be grateful for right now. I mean, granted, like, the topic of this is the staffing shortages and things, but in reality, we're still in a phenomenal career. So many people over the last year and a half have come to me and said, hey, how are your practices doing since COVID? And I just responded, I said, our state health department shut all dental practices down for 6 weeks. That was awesome, by the way. 6 weeks to hang out with my kids and go biking and hiking. But B, as soon as literally on a Tuesday night, they gave the email to lift that ban. On Wednesday, we had a full schedule and we've never looked back. So how cool is that to be shut down for 6 weeks and at the flip of a switch, you're up and rolling again? That's pretty amazing.
That's incredible.
That's great that you can be able to do that. And it says a lot about the practice that you've created to be able to just flip on a switch, for sure. And before we move on, I do want to highlight that you do it in your morning huddle, which means that everyone is encouraged to be at the morning huddle, which means they're going to be on time. They're going to be ready. They're all going to get on the same page, which then also instills a good staff and a good team and environment. So I love that that's when you do it. That's a great time to do it. What can you say about valuing? I know we talked a little bit about this with these Mason Gives, but valuing each team member, I think it's a lot easier to be really critical. Let me rephrase this question. How do you stop yourself from being critical about the things that maybe bother you about the staff? Because it's really easy, I think, with my dad and my brother being dentists, you give people instruction, right? And then sometimes they don't listen. And then you give it again, and then they don't do it again. And it's really easy to just want to throw your instruments on the table and just throw your hands up and say, okay, I'm done. So how do you seem like a really even-tempered guy. How do you do that?
Hey, remember, he did have a stint in the NFL, so the guy's got some aggression.
Right. I'm so glad that you think I'm even-tempered. I won't let my wife come in and answer that. But a few years ago, I read a book that was a game changer for me. It was called Extreme Ownership. It's written by 2 ex-Navy SEALs who now do business consulting. And I love their perspective. If anything's going wrong, it's my fault. So if the people you answer to are shooting down your ideas and not seeing the value of it, then it's my fault because I probably haven't communicated it well enough. I haven't given them the data to say, hey, here's why this is a good idea. And on the other side, the people who report to you, if they're not giving you the information you need or they're not doing what you're supposed to, once again, you look at it and say, it's my fault. I haven't made my expectations clear enough. B, given you the steps or the tools you need to accomplish it. And I love it because it's not it's all my fault, poor me, this is awful. It's more of how can I communicate and clarify my message, either going up or going down, so that everyone understands. So sometimes we'll have one of our leads or our managers say, I have talked to her 5 times about this. And we'll step back and say, okay, specifically, what have you said to him? And for one example, it's like, oh, you need to be on time. I'll say, okay, great. Have you said what on time means? Is being on time for huddle, is that what's considered on time? And in our office, huddle's at 7:45, but to be on time is to be there by 7:30 to get all the rooms set up, get the equipment turned on, and then be dressed and ready for huddle at 7:45. So have you clarified that? And then if they know that, then I'll say, step back and ask why, what's going on, and try to figure out what's going on in the person's life. But that idea of extreme ownership has been impactful for me because as the business owner, knowing that our leads report to our specific managers and our managers report to our business manager and the business manager reports to me, if there's team members who aren't understanding it and aren't getting it, I realize it ultimately comes down to me. So what can I share that goes down the command chain to better communicate that, to better express that? And does it need to be me that sits down with the staff member? to express that vision and those goals and that value. So I think for us, that's one thing, because yes, it is extremely frustrating. We recently had a review with a girl who had been late multiple times, and it was great because she said, "Cam, I'm doing my best."
Mm.
And I said, "This is awesome. I appreciate you doing your best, but this isn't pickleball. It's not a mountain bike race. This is on time. Best isn't good enough. You have to be here by 7:30. That is my expectation."
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, "Okay, I'll do my best." The next 2 days she came in late, and we let her go do her best somewhere else.
Yeah. Because I love that you said that. We let her go do her best somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have your culture set like that, people either rise to the occasion or they kind of weed themselves out. Right. And then, and if you don't address that, or if you don't have that culture, like you said at the very beginning, set from the very start, then that person will continue to be late. You probably won't let them go, or they won't weed themselves out. And that will make everybody else mad. It's just like the start of this perpetual cycle. So
yeah. And I think a lot of it goes back to the leadership concept. Is between our offices, we have 10 doctors, and we meet with them routinely and say, "Hey, we have to set the example. We can't ask our team to be here on time, but then we roll in 3 minutes before patients.
Right.
We need to be at huddle, dressed and ready. Yes, we're not there to set up rooms, but oh man, the team loves it when we do come and help them set up rooms.
Yeah.
But we need to be there, dressed, ready, name tag on, scrubs on at 7:45, because we're setting the example." And just like if one staff member is late, then the rest can say, "Oh, well, if they're not getting in trouble, then I'm going to come late." The same principle. If the doctor, the quote unquote leader of the office is rolling late or playing by a different set of rules, then I think that's the first step just to chaos in an office.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I'll take a second and just highlight something that Cam didn't say right out of the gates necessarily, but as you've been explaining things, it's become clear and clear about the way that you're running a practice and leading. One of the things in my years now working in dentistry, I've noticed that there's a lot of practices that have a habit of setting expectations that are pretty subjective, right? So is it a good hygienist, or did I have a good day in the hygiene department? A lot of times is, well, yeah, like my patients like me, they were smiling, which those are all very good things. But what Cam's done is he's begun to set some very clear expectations, right? So this is the time you show up, or this is what performance looks like. And sometimes people can be concerned that setting clear expectations feels like I'm not micromanaging, but maybe a little bit, right? Like I'm very clear on what I want to have happen. But I found that as expectations are more clear, it creates this environment for our team members to really thrive and succeed and rise to the occasion. So I think I'd highlight the fact we talked a lot about gratitude in the beginning, and now Cam's talked a little bit more about the need to set very clear expectations with the team and having that clear understanding as a leader. And that helps create a really strong environment for team members to know how to succeed, right? And then in that situation, as long as they're hitting those expectations, they feel comfortable about their job. I'm surprised at how many professionals, especially the younger ones, always feel this nervousness about whether they're doing a good job or not. Is their job on the line? You'd be surprised at how many people are afraid of like just losing their job, right? They think about that often. And so when there are clear expectations like that, that gives them this greater sense of peace about their job and where they stand with their employer. So I really like the comments, Cam, that you made there.
There's a great book written by Brene Brown. It's called Dare to Lead, and she's phenomenal. But one of the things she talks about in Dare to Lead, and I love this quote, I've used it dozens of times since, she says, "Clear is kind." People clearly know what you're expecting and what you're looking for. It's kind because then they know the answer. Because for one person, being on time might be, "Hey, I'm here before the patient, so that's cool." But the reality is, clear is, "I need you here at 7:30 to help start getting the office ready." As a team, we set this up.
And also clear is in the reason why you need to be on time is because X, Y, and Z, right? Not just
exactly
7:30, but even more clear. I love that book, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. The one thing that you said as well was you talked about reviews. Tell me a little bit about how you review your staff. What does that look like in your practice?
Awesome. Yeah, we have a system in place. And talking about the part of the clear is kind, several years ago, we created a values template for our office. The initials for our practice is Mountain View Pediatric Dentistry or Granger Pediatric Dentistry. And in each of the offices in the break room, we have a board that says MVPD Smart or GPD Smart. And the SMART each stands for one of the values or something that we're trying to do every day, every patient. And so like the S in SMART stands for start every day and every appointment on time. The M is make every appointment memorable, and goes all the way down. So when we do our reviews, we use the 360 review program where the person getting reviewed, one, they fill out a SMART form, which they rate themselves from 0 to 10 on how they're doing on each of the 10 areas. But then our business manager gives one of those SMART forms to somebody that works side by side with them in their area, and then the other areas of the office. So if they're a hygiene assistant, another hygiene assistant gets it, and then an operative assistant also gets it, and then one of the front office gets it, and a doctor gets it. So they're getting the 360-degree review of this is what everybody in the office is observing of how you're doing. So in their review, we sit down with the MVPD Smarts. The first thing we do is we read theirs. And it's always funny because the person getting the review always rates themselves lower than anyone else. They're so hard on themselves.
Yeah.
So we talk about that. And then we talk about, well, here's what your peers have said. And it's always anonymous. We never say, hey, this is what Katie's saying about you.
That's good.
And it's really cool because on the both sides of the spectrum, on one side, we've had assistants in tears because of the gratitude that their team has shown to them. They're like, I had no idea that people appreciated working with me this much. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side too, we've also seen people be like, oh, I can't believe people say that about me. That's so mean. Like, it's not really mean. It's just what they're observing. And if you roll in 10 minutes late every day and they're setting up all the rooms for you, yeah, they're going to be a little upset that you're not showing up on time. Mm-hmm. And so that's our review process. And the review is usually with either the clinical manager or the front office manager and the business manager, depending upon where the team member is. And it's 2 managers with one staff member. And I've kind of stepped out of that role of doing the reviews and allowed the managers to do that, empowered them to truly be the leaders in their areas. And it's great. And based upon how they're doing, based upon how they're growing, how they're playing in the team, it affects their bonus and hourly wage. So if they're rocking it, then of course, we're backing it up with finances. But if they're struggling, sometimes we'll say, hey, let's revisit this in 90 days and see what we can do to make this better. More of the clearest kind, like here's what we want.
I love that you do that. It's a lot easier said than done to hold reviews on a frequent basis. A lot of people talk about doing it, but not a lot of people actually follow through with doing reviews. And I love that you guys do it that way, because it really does hold your staff accountable, holds mm-hmm. themselves accountable to what they think they're putting out. And I love that it creates value. I mean, obviously with the gratitude and the mm-hmm. tears shown from assistants, that's such a fantastic thing. Thank you for showing that actionable thing for other team members. I'm sure that was really helpful for them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm even here just thinking that I want to go do this for myself. I'm going to go get a survey and give it to everyone that works with me and see what they have to say.
I would love to fill out a SMART for you.
Done.
I'll take a copy.
That's funny. Oh, good. Well, I want to give you a little bit of time before we ask our last question, which is what we ask everybody. But tell me a little bit about masongives.com. What is that? Tell me a little about this organization that you've created.
You know, it started years ago. I got invited to go on a dental humanitarian mission to Guatemala probably 10 years ago. Dr. Dean is a pediatric dentist in Colorado. Still don't know to this day where he got my email address, but he got it and he invited me. And I went and just loved it. I brought 2 or 3 of the assistants from the office, and we had an amazing time. I'd never been to really deep into a developing country like that. I'd never done comprehensive dentistry the way that Dr. Dean had set it up. And I was completely enamored by it. So I went a couple more times, and this idea of giving service, giving back with a career that I have to do so much with, had just kind of been marinating in my brain for years. And then I was working with a CRNA one day. We were doing some sedation cases. And just in passing, she was telling me about a friend of hers who took their entire family to Nicaragua for a year, but they didn't do anything humanitarian. They just played. They surfed and played on the beach. And in my head, the idea of the humanitarian concepts and then this living somewhere with your family just kind of exploded in my head. And I remember sitting down talking to Dr. Dean one night. It was late at night. And I said, hey, Glenn, I have this crazy idea. I want to run it past you. Just tell me if I'm insane. I said, I want to move to a developing country with my family and do dentistry for a year. What do you think? And he was kind of quiet on the other end of the line. He says, I think that could be cool. He said, what does your wife think about the idea? And I said, I don't know. I haven't.
Asked her.
I said, I'm doing my due diligence first. And he said, here's the deal. He said, you've got to get her down on one of our missions first to see what she thinks. Because you know as well as I do, if she doesn't like the idea, your dream dies. I said, okay.
Yeah,
so
my husband's a helicopter pilot.
Yeah. So the next month or the next year, I take Mandy down to Guatemala with me. And all it does is serves as a catalyst. Like she's ready to come home, sell everything we have and move the next month. And I'm like, whoa. There's a lot of things we have to do here. I'm like, I'm the only doctor in the practice. We've got to put a lot of things into place to make this happen. But we created a 5-year plan of fulfilling that dream. Everything from getting additional doctors to getting a manager that could run the office in my absence. And then we started to reach out to nonprofit organizations that I had worked with that do dentistry in Guatemala. And I told them what we were doing and asked if we could run it all through them. And I think it scared them. No one had ever come to them with the idea of a year-long humanitarian mission. So they all just kind of panicked and said, no, that's out of our scope. So I was sitting there talking to my attorney and telling him the struggles I was having. And he said, let's just start our own. So my wife and I, we created the organization called Mason Gives, and it's named after Mason, our mascot in the office. So, he's not just our mascot. He gives back to the community. He gives back to children all over the world. And through Mason Gives is the foundation that we got donations to go and do a year of dentistry in Guatemala. And it's been pretty awesome because what started as just us going down has turned into us hosting dental humanitarian missions for other offices, for teams that come down, for us hosting families that aren't dental related, but we go and expose them to the culture and the adventure and the food of Guatemala. And we even do youth leadership weeks where we take kids 15 to 18 years old and expose them to things they're not normally exposed to. And not just humanitarian and developing countries, but morning routines, goal planning, communication. And with the backdrop of Guatemala, where everybody's on an equal playing ground, it's amazing. We had 21 people with us earlier this year. And during the group, 2 different parents came up to me and said, I just wanted to let you know that my 15-year-old son said this is the best week of his life. Not just a great week, but the best week of his life. And 2 different parents had told me that. So it's so amazing to be able to be part of something that we can go and do dentistry and change people's health and well-being. But it sounds so cliche to say, oh, we get more out of it than they do. But I know our teams coming down, spending 10 days in Guatemala, providing service, go home with way more than the kids we fix. I mean, it is truly life-changing. And it was that Dr. Dean who introduced me to it all those years ago that has changed my life and changed the focus of my life and the direction and where I spend my time off. Like we'll go down and spend 3 weeks at a time. And a lot of people say, you just leave your practice for 3 weeks. I say, we have awesome people in the office. They don't need me. They don't need me. Our systems are in place. We have phenomenal people. And I get so much out of it, much out of it. So for us, what started out as just an opportunity to grow as a family has turned into sharing it with other dental teams and youth and other families. It was, I think, very telling and very reassuring for us. A couple of weeks ago, we opened up our family trip for next spring. And in a matter of 3 days, it sold out. I mean, it was scary.
I want to go.
And we've got 3 families on the waiting list. So it's so Mason
One more.
Gibbs.
You got one more.
There you go. 4 families on the waiting list.
Yeah.
So
wow.
it's, as you can tell, we're passionate about it.
Yeah.
We love it.
What an inspiring story. Thank you, Dr. Quayle, for sharing that vulnerability with us and sharing that about Mason Gives. That's a great thing that you guys provide. Well, and this next question leads into probably get what you're going to say, which is, what does growth in dentistry look like to Dr. Quayle? And now that you've created this organization, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, because it really does. It means something different to everyone.
Yeah. And as you give me that question, I've thought a lot about that. What does growth mean? And I think going back to that example is if we are truly the lead of our practices, what do we want growth to be? Do we want growth to be just a well-oiled machine, a team that feels valued, higher production, additional offices? I think the first step is defining for each individual, what does that growth mean for us? For me, I take it very personal, and going back to the extreme ownership model, is I know that our team and our offices won't grow unless I personally grow. If I'm becoming a better person, if I'm understanding the profession of dentistry, if I'm understanding patient care and the business side of it better, then I can help our team to grow better. So for us personally, growth, I see it as 2 sides in my vision. One is personal growth. And one thing we do in our office is we have a book club with all of our doctors, managers, and leads. So we're trying to give new concepts and new ways to think about who we are as people and how we fit in this team.
I love that.
And then the other side is business growth. Currently, we have 3 practices, and we're knee deep in the works of simultaneously starting 2 more. And I think that's all because we have that vision, and that's where we want to go. There's a lot of phenomenal pediatric dentists in our area, but I think we do it as well as anybody. And our growth and our busyness shows that the community feels that same way. So we're going into areas where there are not as many pediatric dentists, and we want to do that. So to answer your question, Katie, I think there's 2 sides of it. One is, how are we growing as individuals? And then how are we growing our practices? And that's a question of, do you want to grow it as far as refinement, better systems, happier team, or do you want that in addition to more locations?
Yeah.
So for us, it's growing a better team and doing it in additional locations.
And I also like that they also bleed into one another. That, you know, the way that you grew your practice allowed you to grow yourself individually in being able to do Mason Gives, right? And so I love that they also go together. What a great insight. Well, Dr. Quayle, it's just been good on you, Steve.
I'm grateful for it.
Yes, yeah, good choice. This is so great. This has been Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast. Again, special thanks to our guest, Dr. Cameron Quail. You can find him or reach him at betterpractice.com. We will have that email and masongives.com in our links to our show notes and our website. You can also find those links and other great information by visiting our webpage at dentalintel.com. Again, thank you to Steve Jensen for joining me today. And thanks to our marketing department for all their hard work on this podcast. I'm Katie Polson. Keep growing.